Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 311 Synergy Group Best of 2013 Spring Meeting in Tampa. And I'm Rob Klachuk, and I'm the moderator today for our the webinar. And I am on the 311 Synergy Group leadership team and representing the leadership team on the conference call today. What I want to do is give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. 311 Synergy Group is a industry networking group, and we do information sharing. We like to spend a little bit of time having some fun, and it's open to all municipalities with an interest in 311 or centralized customer service. This year we're being chaired by Esther Tenenbaum, our division manager at the City of Albuquerque. And Esther's got a team of people working on our plans for our conference and our programs for the rest of the year. Want to invite you to join us. We have our annual conference meeting May 4th through 6th, and it's being held this year in San Antonio, Texas, at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. And at CS Week, we spend about 2.5 days packed full of discussions and information exchange. And today you're going to hear from a number of panelists that were part of our conference last year. And you'll get an opportunity to hear from Don Stickney and Steve Carter, and hopefully Janice Quintana, our award winner last year as well. So thanks for everybody for joining us, and I'm going to pass it over now to Don Stickney, who's going to talk a little bit about our comparative survey.
Good morning, everybody. This is Don Stickney in Minneapolis, and I just want to welcome you to the webinar again this year, and also my section on talking about the survey. It's been my privilege to have been involved with the survey for several years now. We have found that information to be very valuable for our operation here, and as I've talked to other members of the 311 Synergy family, or this information provides a lot of answers to a lot of questions. The questions that somebody might get about what are others doing. I was just talking earlier with Rob about we're having elections coming up soon, as they are. And we're going to be getting a new mayor and several new council members, and they always come in with questions like, what are other cities doing, and how are they doing it, and why are we doing this way versus that way, and asking questions about how do we compare to those, and are there things that we should improve or things that we should change. And then, for us, how do we learn as a family from each other and benefit from a lot of those learnings and what's going on in other places. And so the survey has evolved over the last 4 years into the instrument that we have today, and it's going to continue to evolve because the needs and the information that's necessary to do these things of comparison and best practices continues to change. I just wanted to say thank you to the people around the survey team last year. Includes one of my office assistant here, Don Masinzik, Margaret Wright in Dallas, Neil Evans in Toronto, and Terry Pierce in Calgary. I should mention that Margaret's going to be taking over the reins for the survey responsibility going into the future, so we're really happy with that transition as I look to transition out and do other things. And I also want to thank you to Rose, as she's been so valuable in helping us as we've coordinated all this through CS Week and the 311 Synergy Group. So thank you to all those people. The other thing I thought I'd mention to you is I just recently got an email from Andy Maimone out in San Francisco. And around the November time frame, they're actually going to be doing a technology survey. One of the questions we've asked in our survey over the last few years is, would you be interested in being involved in a technology survey to get more in depth as to what are some of the technologies that the various places are using and the installations and agencies? And this is an opportunity to really kind of take that deep dive in that. So we're really thankful for Andy for spearheading that effort, and look for something coming out in around the November time frame to see more about that survey. The other thing I should mention for the survey information that we'll be going over today is from the data that was provided for the 2012 calendar year. So we'll be looking to do another survey, and Margaret will be getting in touch with you and setting that up for a survey based on 2013 data as we go forward. That would be, I'm guessing, sometime at next spring. So I just wanted to mention those things to you as we get ready to dive into some of the survey highlights and what's going on. What did I see as I dug into this? What did you see? Some of the feedback that I've gotten from other organizations as to some of the things that they're starting to see. But again, just to remind everybody, this is based on 2012 data. We sent the survey out in March of this year. We had 48 respondents at that time. 37 completed the entire survey. And one of the things that we've learned in using SurveyMonkey is there's ways we can improve that so people have a better ability to make sure all their information has been entered. We did have several people that came up afterwards, after results were presented at the Synergy Group meeting in May, that also wanted to participate. And then our summary report was made available in July, and those participants also got, in addition to the summary report, received a copy of the detailed spreadsheet that they could dig into for additional details. So depending upon whether you were a participant in the survey, the summary report is available to anybody, and that's available online at the CS Week website, and you can just go click on the link for the 311 Comparative Survey 2012, and you can see that there on the slide as to where to go to do that. Some of the general characteristics that we ask about is the first part of the survey, we just try to level set things and understand generally what's going on. In the survey last year, we had a good distribution of different sizes of 311 operations. We had two respondents that were in the what we call the less than 50,000 population, and we had over 9 that are over in the over 1 million population, and then spread out in between. One of the things that I like to do is I took the summary survey, and out of that I would actually highlight the areas that where Minneapolis fell into. And then as I met with my boss, who is the city coordinator here at the City of Minneapolis, plus with our Results Minneapolis, I was able to pull from that and show people, generally speaking, which area do we fall into. And and so they can get some sense as to how we compare and how we can relate to other agencies. One of the things that's kind of always interesting is what's the reporting relationship for 311, and who do the 311 reporting relationships report up to in the organization. By and large, that is in a city manager, city coordinator kind of structure where the chief administrative officer maybe has responsibility for 311, or in some situations, for example, I know in Buffalo, it reports directly to the mayor's office. So I report to, here in Minneapolis, I report to the city coordinator, then who reports directly into the mayor's office, but we're not considered part of the mayor's office. So if you really lump those two together, the mayor's office and the city manager, that represents about 50% of the 311s that responded as to who they report up through. So that's kind of an interesting evolution that we've seen. The other thing that has gone different directions at different times is the alliance with emergency communications or 911. I do happen to have heard that in Baltimore and in Denver, there's some more close alignment that might be happening between 311 and 911. A lot of times that happens in conjunction with a new building being built that would house 911 and 311. And they can have the emergency preparedness and the generator backup and UPS backup and all those things, trying to economize on those physical locations. Those are some of the things that we're starting to see in the survey as far as how these organizations continue to evolve and where does the 311 organization, what part of the organization does it reside. The other thing that we always take a look at in a general sense is what are the hours of operation. And as you can see by the pie chart there, by and large, almost 49% are typical business hour of operations. But as you look into the data a little bit more, you can see that that also seems to trend by the population size as well. We see a little bit more movement towards extended business hours by some organizations. For example, proposed in our 2014 mayor's proposed budget here in Minneapolis is for us to extend our hours. We're currently 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, but we're also looking to be open on Saturday and Sunday starting next year. So that's proposed in the budget, and hopefully that will get approved. And that's another trend that we're starting to see. After the budget crunches of recent years where a lot of people have been cutting back in hours. We're starting to see, again, where 311 hours are starting to be expanded again to meet customer demand. Interestingly enough, I was at an award Neighbor Fest here recently in the last couple of weeks, and that's exactly what we heard from our customers. You need to be open more hours. So whether it's extended hours in the summertime for your evening hours or over the weekend, that's a common theme that I think we're starting to hear and other installations are as well. The next slide I wanted to share with you about the hours of operation, kind of show you a breakdown by population size. So as we segmented out based on population, you can see as you move to the right to the larger population, there seems to be a lot more extended hours operations and 24/7 operations. So you can see how that continues to evolve based on populations. But that's not always the case, because as you can see on the left-hand side, you can see that there are 24/7 operations in all segments. So if you're thinking about where you're going to go and how you're going to do that, you may want to look at the scope of some of those other 311s to find out why are they a 24/7 operation, or why do they have extended business hours. So those are always kind of interesting things to take a look at a high level. Here in Minneapolis, we fall in the 300,000 to 600,000 population range, and it's one of those things, are we a big city or are we a little city, and which one do we really want to reside in? And so it's kind of interesting as we expect our population to continue to grow here in Minneapolis, and that's the plan as we approach 400,000, the move to more extended hours, and maybe even a 24/7 operation someday might actually evolve. So that's something that we're starting to see as the contact center hours continue to evolve based on what's going on internally at the organization. Also, as 311s mature and as their scope continues to pull in, they may have a need to be open just to provide the services that are being requested. Especially some organizations are beginning to have dispatch operations within their environment, within their 311 environment, and then that dispatch operation would require 24/7 operation. So as we broke out the survey participants and we took a look at that, you can see the spread. We're starting to see even more and more 311 operations in the 1 to 50,000. A city here in rural Minnesota, Mankato, Minnesota, was just here at 311, and they've been up and running as a 311, are really looking to take that to the next level. They've been up and operating for almost 2 years now. So we're beginning to see more and more of the smaller agencies starting to take a look at 311-like services, cloud-based services, instead of standing up a huge system and really buying into that. The other thing is, as the mobile app becomes available through various providers, we're really seeing that starting to be a genesis for a lot of 311s in smaller populations. But as you can see, based on the respondents from last year, you can see how that breaks out by population segment. One of the other things that we are starting to see more and more of, and you've heard a lot about as you attend conferences and as you're getting calls from vendors, is channel shifting and how are people wanting to be in contact with the 311 center. So, as this all happens, we see this beginning to go on more and more channels are being offered. So you can see here that the channels being offered continue to grow. And what's interesting, if you look at this same chart over time, the social network and the mobile application on the far right has grown considerably in the last 2 to 3 years. So that's really a trend that we see everybody that's moving in that direction trying to do. As I talked about, one of the things we like to kind of get an idea is what are the functions that are being included in the various 311 organizations, and which departmental functions do you support. This is an interesting slide for you to take a look at, is maybe where's an opportunity for you to grow into, and then you can learn from what other people have done. For example, here in Minneapolis, the Park and Rec function is a separate agency. But we've learned from our friends in Vancouver, they have a separate Park and Rec independent agency, and how did they develop the working relationship between 311 and Parks and Recs. So that's something that you can learn from, you can develop some best practices on, you can use them as a leverage to maybe to have some discussions and conversations. So as you look at the scope of what your 311 supports, here's an opportunity for you to see where are the most common and which ones are the emerging ones that you might want to take a look at in regards to the scope of your 311 center. Some of the things that we're looking at here, particularly that I highlighted in my report to our council and to my boss, happen to do with the utility billing. For example, in Dallas, you know, the utility billing and 311 are all together. So it's an interesting process to see how this continues to evolve and the scope of 311 continues to change. And really, you know, the goal over time here in Minneapolis is there's only two numbers to remember that you have to call in the city of Minneapolis, and that's 911 for emergency and 311 for non-emergency. We're not quite there yet, but we're on the road. One of the things we also like to take a look at is what are the various service levels we should be looking to achieve and what's really a standard. As we ask this question on service level as a percentage of calls answered within so many seconds, there's a wide variety of measurements out there that are used. Here, for example, in the city of Minneapolis, our goal is 80% of our calls answered within 20 seconds. And we hit that very close last year on our service level, but you can see that there's an accumulation of service levels around that 80-20 to 80-30, 80-40 area in that lower right-hand quadrant of that comparative chart. So that's something you may want to take a look at. That's also something maybe from the standpoint of an industry that we may want to standardize what our service level measure is to make it more comparative, so that we're all measuring on 20 seconds or 30 seconds, what's the percentage of calls answered within 20 or 30 seconds. So it's really a lot more comparative. So that's maybe something for a discussion at the next conference that's coming up. The average speed of answer is another one of those dimensions that everybody looks at and compares as to how quickly they're doing. This is an aspect, of course, of your service level, but it also can vary a little bit based on what's going on in your center at any particular time. Of the 32 respondents that were able to answer this question, we're able to break that out that, you know, less than 20%, less than 20 seconds seems to be, you know, about 38% of those in 2012. 38% of the respondents were less than 20 seconds. Some were another 28% in the 21 to 40 seconds group, and then over 60, there were 10 respondents that reported they were over 60 seconds. So some of the conversations that might want to happen there, you may want to call one of those organizations that has a faster speed of answer, and what is their strategy for getting there, and how do they do that? Is it some creativity that they have with their staffing module, or is it just an understanding of what needs to be done? Excuse me. And then in looking at the goals, the upper left-hand graph is actually what was achieved in 2012. And then 2013, you can see there's some migration as people look to migrate from the over 60 seconds into the 41 to 60 seconds, or even in the 21 to 40 second range. So that 21 to 40 second range looks to be the growth area, which for a lot of people is that cost-effective measure, or that cost-effective range to be in as a average speed of answer. Abandoned calls is another typical contact center measure that people take a look at as to how long will people, you know, how many of the callers actually hang up before getting to an agent. This measures actually when they've hung up after they've gotten into the queue, and so you can see as to how people are taking a look at that measure. One of the other things, as I talked with Neil from Toronto, is that when you measure these things is really critical too. And as we look at standardizing this survey, is it after the call has hit the queue, or is it while it's from entry into your system? So that's another thing you have to take into consideration. And in this situation, it's after they've hit in the queue. You can see the comparisons there on abandoned calls and what their goals are. But generally speaking, you know, if we were to identify people would like to be in the area of being at under 8%, 8 to 10% under that as far as the number of abandoned calls are concerned. And I think that as we looked at that, you can kind of see as to how that falls out. If I were to take a look at some additional data that I have here, the median response on abandoned calls was 6%. So that's, you know, half the group above and half the group below, but the median response was 6%. Here's the average agent handle time, or your CSRs, or your customer service agents. I thought it would be interesting to kind of show this over all the respondents to this. The median here is 189 seconds, and there were 30 responses to that. So you can kind of see as to how quickly or how long the agent is actually on the call with the customer on an average basis. The other thing you have to take into consideration, if you look back at the scope of the particular 311 that you're talking about, it might impact how long they're actually on the call. If you're handling a lot of transit calls, which are very quick calls to handle and wrap up and move on, then you might be on the lower end of the scale. As you automate a lot of those easy-to-handle calls, you may get up towards the top end of that scale. So that's something to take a look at and see if there's a trend over time and what's happening in your particular organization. I take you to this next slide, which is a result of the surveys that have been done over the past few years. You can actually see the first one is for calendar year 2009, not 2010. But as you can see over the last 4 years, how the average handle time for all respondents to these surveys has grown on an annual basis. And so we talked about this at the survey last year, and you can see how this continues to change as you move a lot of the easier to handle calls by providing better web content, moving people to self-service, implementing apps. Those easy to handle calls are being automated, and what's left are the more difficult to handle. So as a result, you're going to see your average handle time go up. So you may have to make adjustments in your staffing model accordingly to take that into consideration. Let's move on to the next slide. I had a question about that came up here about did any of the respondents indicate an outsource center? And you know that I don't know of any. If anybody can make a comment about that, I don't know of which ones have an outsourced call center. I know a lot of people do comparisons to an outsourcer, but I don't know of any that have outsourced their entire 311 operation. Some of the trends that we see in the industry, and this chart is kind of a diagram that we've done over time, and as things begin to emerge, this is what we start to see happening. We increase that bubble just to kind of give you a sense as to what are some of the things that are going on in the industry. First and foremost, smartphone apps and applications are just absolutely booming. Not only that, but then also looking at Open 311 so that those smartphone apps can communicate directly to your particular installed CRM solution. If you look over to the right even further, you know, the yellow cloud there about cloud-based services, I think there's a huge discussion going on about cloud-based services. We're in the final steps of getting to finalizing a contract for cloud-based services as we go through a major upgrade here in Minneapolis. Text message capability, at least here in Minneapolis, we're hearing from our hearing impaired community that TTYs and TDDs are not being used anymore, so text messaging, the 311 center. And then the other thing that we're seeing is that the next generation CRM and knowledge base, that whole evolution as to what's happened to the original CRM that might have been installed, and that conversion to the next major version or even to a new version as we see that happening in the industry. The other thing that's kind of happening is some other interesting new twists that we are hearing about through the survey. The city of Boston actually has Justin up there is using a mobile 311 kind of operation. You'll see that, and they revamped a police department van for their purposes. Dallas has a SUV that's been graffitied for a 311. And so there's some new twists that we're seeing for visibility and connecting back to the community. Here in Minneapolis, the whole use of digital signage, kind of a new twist on an old technology for providing updates in snow emergencies. So it's going to be interesting to hear more about some of these new twists on old technologies or old approaches as we look to reconnect back even more and engaging our citizenry. So finally, as I get ready to close here, I just want to remind you that if you do need a copy of the survey summary, you can go out to the 311 CS Week Synergy Group site. If you want to help out with the survey, please feel free to contact Margaret Wright, and there's Margaret's email address. And I just want to say thank you and appreciate all the time I've had a chance to work with this. So I look forward to working with you again in the future. Thanks a lot, and I'll turn it back to you.
Steve, over to you. Steve Carter from CANA was one of our Diamond sponsors, and we're going to have Steve walk us through a little bit of his information that he provided in Tampa as well.
Rob, Steve may be experiencing technical difficulties with his audio.
Steve, are you there?
Rob, Steve may be experiencing technical difficulties with his audio.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Dawn while we're waiting to see if we can get Steve available here? We have a question asking if the PowerPoints can be emailed to us. We actually post the webinar PowerPoints on our CS Week 311 Synergy Group website. So they're made available there after the call. So we will be doing that shortly after the call. Any other questions?
Rob, you've had a couple more come up.
Yeah, I see we've got a question from Lynette. Dispatch ops in 311. Does this consist of the call takers only or those that handle the actual dispatch? Dawn, do you have a feel for that one?
Sure, I think. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. The feel that I get for that is that there's a dispatch function separate from what the agents do in the 311 center. So it's like a separate function away from the operators that they do. Some of the functions that I'm hearing about is, I know Margaret down in Dallas, they have the dispatch function in their organization. I think that's for all the dispatching related to their utilities. There's other areas that are taking a look at dispatch functions related to animal care and control and some of those as they look at some of those non-emergency functions. So it's a separate function, though, within the role of a 311 center.
Thanks, Dawn. We have Steve on the line now. Steve? Steve Carter, are you on the line?
I believe he can hear us, Rob, but we can't hear him.
So we have another question too. For me, this is from Steve Toller. He says, what extent are communities implementing 311 services without actual 311 dial-up service? For example, how many are only pursuing mobile apps as their interface with the public? And I know in the survey we asked, how many are using the 311 number, and many are using still 10-digit dialing. And I was in the ICMA at ICMA recently, and we're seeing a lot of the smaller communities certainly pursuing other options for not using 3-digit dialing to basically connect with their citizens, and certainly mobile apps are a good way for many of them to get in. Can you provide the contact info for Dallas so that I may find out more about their dispatch ops? And yeah, we can definitely, Margaret Wright I can make sure that I get that to you. Lynette also has a question, does your 311 center use a language translation service, and if so, which one? I can speak for the City of Edmonton, which I represent. We use the Language Line service. And I know there's been some discussion on our discussion forums around language on our LinkedIn site. So, we can, certainly, that's a good place for Lynette for you to post that and get other feedback from other cities within our network. So again, we're located, if you search for 311 Synergy Group on LinkedIn, you join our group, and there's an ability to have people respond to your question. So I think we have the City of Charlotte online as well right now, and we'll try and advance the slides to, so City of Charlotte was our first recipient of the 311 Synergy Group Award of Excellence, and they're going to speak a little bit about some of the reasons that they put forward for their excellence in 311 services. So can we get Stacy on the line? Stacy and Janice Quintana from City of Charlotte. Sorry, everyone, we're having some technical difficulties here, but please bear with us. So while we're waiting to see if we can get them, does anyone experience or have knowledge about 311 centers taking calls for auto theft and breaking and entering?
Rob, can you hear me on this?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, here in City of Minneapolis, we do take non-emergency police reports. There are numbers of types that we take, including those. We also have an online report process where people can report 5 different types of common crimes that don't need a squad dispatch, and they just need to get a police report entered. It goes directly into our police reporting system. So we do take a lot of those. If somebody would like some additional information on that, just drop me an email and I can send you kind of a spreadsheet of what we do take here and what the opportunity might be.
The next question is, has anyone done research on opportunity costs of 10-digit versus a 311? And I know, certainly the cost of the telephony portion, I can speak for in Canada here, the 311 provisioning is actually a mandate of the telephone company, so we don't have that issue, and you'll see most jurisdictions within Canada can use the 311, but I know it certainly can be an issue, and there's been a bit of a discussion about 10-digit versus 311 on a discussion group going on right now on our 311 Synergy group on LinkedIn. Don, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, here in Minneapolis, we do not pay any fees for people that do dial 311. And so people are becoming very familiar with using the 311 dialing. So maybe it's because of the time when we went live, but it seems to be a lot of the local telephone providers are seeing this as a possible revenue source, and so they're starting to charge for that. But we don't pay any fees here in the City of Minneapolis for people who use the 311 dialing capability.
Any other questions while we're... Did any of the survey data include counties, is the next question.
Yeah, one of the questions we asked, and that's a great question, one of the questions we ask is what kind of organization are you, city, city only, county only? Of the respondents, let me look here real quick. Of the respondents, municipal only, there were 81% of them were municipal only. Municipal and county combined was 6%. And for those that were county only, there were 4%. The 4% represents 2 respondents, at least in this survey. So, you know, it's a smaller number for county only, and the 13% were 6 that responded that were municipal and county combined, which would be like Charlotte, Mecklenburg, San Francisco. Those are some of the ones I know right off the top of my head. So it was a smaller number, but there are respondents from both.
Great, thanks, Don. Lynette Lemon responded also that she says, we're currently engaged in that discussion too, and the consensus is that cell providers will incur the cost, which means depending on your carrier, you may be able to dial through one run rather than 10 digits. So that certainly can be an opportunity. Don, so you mentioned we're going to be doing a survey probably in the new year, of course, because this we like to do our surveys for the entire year. So we'll have a process for people to, and the more people that join in, the better the data that we can get. So you know, I encourage everyone to make sure we send out links to the survey to people that have shown interest in it, and we certainly ask people to join our LinkedIn site, and that's certainly where we generate some of the interest. So I just want to make sure everyone can be part of that process as well. We're just checking to see. Hey, Steve.
Can you hear me finally? There.
We can hear you, Steve. So we're going to try and take the slides back here. Lisa, if you can queue up Steve's slides here. And so Steve Carter is from CANA, and they were one of our Diamond sponsors at last year's conference. And I'm going to just pass it over to Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much, Rob. Sorry for the challenges getting dialed in there, but we figured it out eventually. A couple of things I wanted to talk about as kind of some highlights from what we did and presented on back at the conference were expanding on some of the ideas that you heard from Don in the survey. And that idea was all around what we call digital by default. And the idea is that there's been a lot of talk the last few years about channel shift and other things. But at CANA, the Lagan product line we have has been used heavily around the world in public sector, especially for 311 call centers. And we've been driven by a lot of input from people like Don and Rob and others, and Janice and Charlotte, who's a new customer of ours, that they really want to take and expand the types of interactions they're going to have with their citizens and let citizens kind of choose that platform. And one of the guys that works with me at CANA is David Moody. And David made the comment you see on the slide today is that we think, based on input we get from all of our customers, is that within about 7 years, we think that phone channel, which is a heavily dominant way of communicating these days, will probably be one of the lower percentages of interaction channels. We know there's a large amount of your constituents out there who still prefer to call you, but we think there's going to be growing numbers who use all those other channels, and the survey totally illustrated that. And when we look at this process, you know, the thing we see is, you know, I like to liken it to the picture you see of the Mercat, where they're out there and we've got our citizens out there and they're our sensors. And they're kind of telling us what's going on. They're giving us an input of what's there. And if we can choose to engage them through these other channels, not only are we opening up communication from government to them, but we're also allowing them to help us collect and report and see information in real time. And that drove us to this big expansion we've seen the last few years around Open 311 and mobile apps, and it's a trend we think is going to continue. And what we have now is we have that device that these citizens can utilize, and in most cases it's a matter of convenience. They understand that now they can take a photograph. We know exactly where the GPS location is. They can put a pin in a Google map, and they can answer a couple of questions, and they've got a subset of frequently used case types and request types they can make. That's going to be very popular because it's not necessarily going to make it complicated. It's very easy to do, and it's really nice how effective these apps are. And as we see those rolled out, I actually see that these apps, I call them, they've got some secret weapons in them. And the real thing is that we make it easy to pick the location. We attach a photograph and we get an automatic location. And I had a really interesting comment from one of our customers in San Antonio where their CIO now believes this may be the most accurate information they're ever going to get from a citizen. They've got great scripting and agents in the call center at 311, and they can talk to citizens, but citizens can describe the problem. They're going to use terminology they may not be that sure. But one of the real nice things you get when you have these applications is you get photographs of what these problems are. And what we've realized now is that with our application, that it's now just as important to take that photograph and get it to the crew so that what that citizen thought may be a flooded street is actually not a broken water main, it's a clogged catch basin. And they need to dispatch a different crew, or the crew needs to go with what they need equipped. And more, we're hearing feedback through our contact center supervisors and those people who use this software every day that what they really want to see is the next growth in mobile applications is to put this information, these photographs, that where it is on the map, in the hands of the crew who's going out to do the work. And in that case, that crew that's out there, before they get there and they know what they're going to do, they've got the work order information, they can see that, but now they're looking at, they can take that map, they can see the photograph, and now they maybe even decide, exactly that may not be the problem. Instead of sending a crew, let's send an inspector. Now you're getting into, we think, a better, more efficient process to respond and close those requests. And what that leads us to is collecting the information and storing the updates from the field, but that gives you a whole different type of information. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But when we look at the channels, one of our customers, Boston, really showed us some unique data from a blizzard they had earlier this year, where for the first time the reports around after the blizzard hit, where there were unshoveled sidewalks and those kinds of things, over a couple of days they got over 2,000 requests, but it was interesting to see that 34% of those came through the web, 30% came from mobile, and 36% from the phone, where people actually called the mayor's call center. And that's a great example where Justin, the director up there for the mayor's call center, fully believes that they're hitting a level now of responsiveness through these other channels they never expected. That they would get 30% of those requests through the web and 34% from, almost 64% from web and mobile versus people calling, means that they've got the social media working, they're getting those requests through these other channels, and that's really kind of opened up their eyes to what's going on with that. And with our product generation with Lagan Enterprise, we see all of that as what we call omni-channel engagement, is that you want to interact regardless of what it's your agents on the phone, it's your citizens coming to the city's website or the county website, are they tweeting about this, or they're on social media, or they're using those mobile apps. We want it all tied together so that all that information feeds through and we're feeding it to the back office. And that kind of leads us to one of the new things we've got that we now have pushed that's been directly driven by customer feedback, which is putting that information and giving mobile apps so that it can run on smart tablets and smartphones and any kind of wireless device and work maybe when they're disconnected, is that this information is not going to be visible to those guys in the streets. So if you take any of your remote service crews and people that are out of the office, they can take their application, they can see cases, they can see where they are on the map, see cases nearby where they are, they can create new cases just like citizens can, but they can see those photographs, they can see where they are, and we think that's really going to give them complete access to customer service while they're out in the street and when they're engaging with the citizens. And in some cases, they may be fixing and reporting problems and getting it resolved before someone's complained about it, which would be the ultimate customer service. So with that, that's, real key thing we focus on at Econo is our Lagan products are really designed to do these things. We think all of those things you saw in the survey that Don mentioned are critical and important to the future where we're going to go, and that's exciting for us. And we really enjoyed being in Tampa, but we really look forward to seeing everybody out. I think we're in San Antonio next year, and they just launched a mobile application as well for their citizens, and it's doing well. All right, thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Steve. And if there's any questions for Steve, please, set it up on the chat, and we'll hopefully have an opportunity to go back to answer any of those questions. We're still trying to get the City of Charlotte on the line here so that they can give a bit of an overview of kind of their operation, and they were, as I said, our inaugural award winner of excellence for the 311 Synergy Group. We're planning to do the same award for next year, and the awards committee is working on plans to start the program again for next year. And so, start thinking about in your operations of initiatives that you've been working on that you believe that would be of the caliber that we're looking for. And as I said, the awards committee have the details out shortly. Any questions for Steve? Steve, anything, just if I can ask you a question from a perspective of, the ability to, I heard the Boston presentation as well, the ability for, a product like Kana to help during a kind of an emergency situation. We all kind of have our day-to-day stuff. They talked a little bit about how their center is really changing with its ability to respond to like a snow crisis, or they had the marathon circumstance there. Can you just comment on that a little more?
Yeah, I sure can, Rob. I think every one of our customers has found that situation where, when you get some kind of an emergency, and even those events that are planned, like the Olympics, like Vancouver went through, or Toronto with the G8 Summit, where there's major disruptions in what happens, whether it's due to, some kind of weather event, or Minneapolis had the bridge collapse over the Mississippi River when the interstate was down. And when those events happen, whether it's that or the bombings, the ability to communicate quickly and to read and react to what's going on with social media is probably the newest impact of that. We've seen great examples over the years where 311 becomes a great place to contact to get information related to the events. What's the transportation situation, what streets are closed, what things are operating still, what city services are going to be out of action for the period of time, or what city services are coming back now. I know I talked to Winnipeg yesterday. They just had a recent flood and had water boil advisories, and they get a lot of communication around that. But the idea now that you can kind of monitor situations and make sure that the city's aware of what the citizens are talking about in real time. And besides the ones that are calling you, if they're posting pictures of tree damage like they saw in Boston, or in the case of after the marathon when they put out the call for anyone that had photographs that might have been there right before the bombs went off, being able to handle the calls for information. People think they may have information. How do they get it there? We see a lot of those people are using solutions like ours to update their knowledge base with all that information, make it real time, make it available on the web. And the goal in the future is to try to push that even more to mobile and social, and do more real-time analytics to look at all that stuff going on and try to come out of it and pull meaning out of it and say, hey, we've got some topics and key areas, items of interest that we seem to be looking at that we may want to focus on more. Maybe we need to communicate a message better, or things like that.
Thanks, Steve. I think we have Janice Quintana from the City of Charlotte on the line now. Janice.
Hopefully you can hear me. Am I on?
You are on. I can hear you.
Ta-da! There's about 10 people to figure this out over here. All right, so good morning, everyone. Steve, who's driving this PowerPoint, you? Or do we have the ability here?
You have the ability, but I can help you out too.
Got it. I'm clicking, but nothing's happening. Hold on. All right, here we go. So the City of Charlotte, we have about 800,000 people here. Our call center is combined with Mecklenburg County, who has themselves about 1 million people. Actually, I think Charlotte's closer to 1 million now, those statistics. You can go ahead and switch to the next page. We launched in FY06, and that was July 2005. We started off with 94 FTEs, and at that time we were a 24/7 operation. our funding started at about 4.1, our startup. We do get 26% if our budget is funded by the county. In FY12, we turned that operation to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're open 7 days a week, and we have 141 FTEs even now in FY13. Our budget's about $8.6 million, and we also continue to get funded 26% by the county. We take about 1.7 million calls. About 300,000 of those calls are self-service. We are very proud to announce that we are going to use Kana Lagin, so we'll be working with Steve here. We were just in our newsletter, our internal newsletter, celebrating that we finally closed out on that contract after about a year, so we're excited to have that happen. This next page is the Mayor's Youth Employment Program. We started this 2 years ago with a Citizen Information Academy for the youth in the summer, so we got about 10 employees last year, and then this summer we did 15 employees, and they work 4 hours a day right during that kind of busy time where lunch and breaks are, and we have them just taking bulky items. They took about 5,000 calls this summer, so it's been really a good citizen engagement and a good youth engagement program for us, and then they get to learn some customer service skills. One of the questions for this award that we were so happy to win was describe what has been done to foster a sense of teamwork in your customer service center. And we really started doing using the mantra, you can't manage what you don't measure. We really started sharing all the performance metrics to every single employee, sending it out every single day. We recently just put up some big boards, monitors that have the stats every day, along with other recognition. But we really started to get the investment of the employees, what they knew, what they can handle, whether it be after-call work or knowing what really abandonment rate was and what our goals are on the balanced scorecard. And I think that just kind of gave them ownership of the company. We do try to have a lot of fun with some other recognition events. We did like March Madness. We've had a really great customer service week. We've done book clubs. We have monthly recognition. And we do different things throughout the days and the weeks to try to keep people motivated. This is one of the initiatives that we did. We had a coat drive, and we collected 300 coats and donated that to Crisis Assistant Ministry. We've also done food can drives, and we've done towel drives for the Humane Society. This is another question. Describe what has been done to foster a sense of teamwork in your customer service center. Is that the same? Well, anyways, we talked here about the DNC. We hosted the DNC last year here in Charlotte, and that was really a great initiative, not just for the city coming together collaboratively, but just for our center as well. We extended our hours to 1 a.m. from August 31st to September 7th. We were asked to participate in a bunch of different operations centers. So we had employees at the JIC Information Center, we had people at the Emergency Operations Center, and we had people at the Public Works Operations Center. And we also had people in City Hall sitting in the rotunda to ask questions of anybody that may come through there. We provided alternative workspace for approximately 20 employees who were not able to make it downtown because it was really high security. It was hard to get in that building. So we shared some of our space so other staff from the city could continue working during that time frame. We created kind of like a little situation room where we installed a phone that would just be calls coming from all those other operation centers like the JIC if they needed to call us or we needed to give them information if stuff people were calling about. We were able to actually view or air the president's speech on the, or the nominee at the time, the candidate, on the big screen so people could feel a part of ownership. We're a little bit further away from downtown where the action is. We're about 16 miles away. So they didn't get to see a lot of, all the hoopla that was happening. They just heard a lot about it. But here are some pictures of downtown Charlotte. And my IT manager, Stacy Palmer, I'm going to let her go ahead and talk about technology.
Yeah, we did we implemented an automated IVR system where Janice told you earlier in this presentation that about 300,000 of our 1.7 million calls are handled by that IVR, and that is an interactive unit where, depending on what the customer says, in other words, the IVR doesn't follow a single path. Depending on what the customer says, it can go in many different directions, including straight to Western Union SpeedPay. The inbound IVR provides account information and connects them, like I said, to Western Union SpeedPay, or it can connect right back to a CSR. And to be perfectly honest, most of the call volume, although all of our utility call volume is front-ended by the IVR, most of it does end up coming back to CSRs. Now, we also do an outbound IVR program, which has proven to be quite successful, where we call citizens who are 30 days behind or more on making their water bill payment. And those calls, again, we offer the citizen the opportunity to go straight to Western Union to make a payment or to contact back to a CSR to set up a payment arrangement. And what we have seen, the impact of that has been a positive one. Our goal was to try to roll fewer trucks to do turnoffs, and that is exactly what we're seeing happen. So it is doing, because the fee we charge for that turn-off, turn-on is not as much as it actually costs us. So that program is going very well. Delinquent service orders performed by CMUD staff in 2012 decreased by 22%. Payment arrangement activity has increased by nearly 10%. Again, that is a very positive trend because it's less expensive than to roll trucks.
Thank you very much, City of Charlotte. And I know that Janice is on our planning committee for our conference next May. So I know we've got a lot of work ahead of us to plan the program, and I'm glad that she has joined us for that. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on the call. And I know we had a few technical difficulties, but I want to thank everyone for their participation. And I know we have Steve Toller sent in a chat on whether mobile apps have some mapping. And I don't know, Steve, if you can just quickly respond to that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can do that, Rob. You can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Right now, it's still a pretty much a use of the Google Maps, just because that's an easier way to do it since most phones have location services. But I would say a big direction, I know we're being driven by our customers, is to actually go ahead and try to use the GIS mapping systems that we have internally. Every request that's created mobile has to go through that authentication and verification against the city GIS. So you usually end up with an X and a Y coming from a Google map that's going to be translated back into an actual city map and property address, location, and verification. But the idea down the road, I think, is to put that internal map out on those devices. We think that's a direction that we're working closely with companies like Esri and Cartograph to do.
Great. Thanks, Steve. So we're coming up to our close here. I want to thank our panelists, Don Stickney, Steve Carter, and Janice Quintana and Stacy Palmer for participating in this conference call and on this webinar. And we're going to have future webinars sponsored by the 311 Synergy Group. So watch out for your communications coming out in the next few weeks. And again, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Sorry we had to rush.
Thanks.